Hey guys, tonight we step directly into a world you probably think you know. But trust me, you're not ready. The sky's low and smoky, the air smells like sweat, horse dung, and something burning in the distance. Maybe meat, maybe a guy. You're standing in a churned-up field surrounded by strangers in steel. Somewhere out there, men are screaming. Not yelling, screaming. And you're about to join them. Here's a fun spoiler. You won't last long. Maybe 30 seconds. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where, and when, you're all watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not a knight. You're not even a trained peasant. You're just you. Dropped into the middle of a medieval battlefield like some messed up history simulator with no tutorial. First thing you notice? The noise. It's not just yelling, it's metal smashing metal, horses screaming, yes, horses scream, armor clanking, and somewhere nearby, a grown man sobbing. The sound hits your chest like thunder. You can't hear your own thoughts. Or maybe you can, and they're just stuck on repeat. What the hell is happening? Now the smell. It's an assault. You get hit with sweat so thick it's almost syrupy, dried blood, wet mud, and unwashed humans who've probably been marching for days while pooping in their own clothes. There's the sharp tang of iron too. Someone's bleeding, maybe lots of someone's. You breathe through your mouth, then regret that instantly. You look down at yourself. Bad idea. Your armor's crooked, if you're even lucky enough to have any. It feels like you're being slow-cooked inside a tin shell. Your limbs already ache just from standing. Your hands, slippery with sweat and shaking like you're trying to play Jenga during an earthquake. You clutch your sword, or more likely, some oversized farm tool repurposed for murder, and you realize it's heavier than you expected. And way more real. There's no war music. No slow-motion hero moment. Just a wall of bodies ahead, kicking up mud, dragging broken weapons, and yelling things you don't understand in dialects you've never heard. And then, just as you're thinking about running the opposite direction, your commander points forward and yells, "Go time." You move, or try to. You're packed in like sardines. Shoulder to shoulder with men who probably hate you, smell worse than you, and don't care if you live or die. You stumble over something soft. You don't want to know what it was. The ground's a mess. It's been trampled by 1,000 boots and hooves. It squelches when you step, sucks at your feet. Every few feet, someone's already face down in the muck, twitching, or not moving at all. You try not to look. You fail. That guy's eyes are open. In the distance, cavalry charges. You see them before you hear them. Massive beasts barreling forward with knights in armor like miniature tanks. You don't even register fear yet. Just confusion. Why are they coming toward us? You glance sideways. Some of your fellow soldiers are praying. Others are vomiting. One guy's muttering what sounds like a love letter. No one is calm. The bravado, gone. Then arrows start falling. It's subtle at first. A thwick sound and a grunt. A man drops. Then 3 more. Then someone screams, "Shields!" Too late. You throw your arm up. But what good is that? These aren't Nerf darts. These are foot-long wooden stakes with iron heads. One slams into the ground near you. Another hits a guy 2 steps ahead, goes clean through his throat. He collapses, gurgling. You're now covered in someone else's blood, and you can taste it. Still want to fight? Your boots slip. You fall to your knees. Someone yells at you to get up. You try. Your legs are jelly. That 30 seconds? You're already 20 in. A man rushes past you, screaming, only to get hit with something blunt that folds him sideways like a deck chair. You finally stagger upright, sword raised like you know what you're doing. You don't. Someone smashes into you from behind. You lose your footing again. You're trampled by your own side before the enemy even touches you. You taste mud. And maybe a tooth. Finally, the clash. Your front line meets theirs. It's not a noble duel. It's not neat rows of men fencing with honor. It's chaos. It's teeth and elbows and weapons jammed in places they were never designed to go. A guy ahead of you gets stabbed so hard his guts come out the back. Someone swings a sword at your head, misses, and still manages to cut your ear. And you haven't even made contact yet. Your survival instinct kicks in. You swing wildly, blindly. You hit something. Or someone. It might have been a friend. Doesn't matter. There's no time to check. Then something slams into your shoulder. Hard. You drop your weapon. That's it. You're unarmed, stunned, deaf, probably dislocated, and kneeling in a field of blood and bodies. Told you. 30 seconds. If you're lucky. Let's pretend, just for a second, that you somehow survived your first 30 seconds. You're bruised, rattled, and barely holding it together. But hey, you're still technically alive. Now comes your next big mistake. Standing up. See, you've never worn armor before. You've never even seen real armor up close, aside from movies where it magically makes people stronger, faster, and hotter. Spoiler alert, it does none of those things. Wearing armor is like strapping a steel oven to your body and hoping no one notices you can't lift your arms all the way. Let's start with the weight. A full suit of plate armor, the kind you probably picture on some gallant knight charging into glory, that can weigh anywhere from 45 to 60 pounds. Now that might not sound like much. You've carried groceries heavier than that, right? Cool, try carrying them while squatting, running, dodging, and fighting for your life, all while being punched in the ribs with blunt instruments. The armor clinks with every move. Every single move. It's like being inside a cathedral bell made of frustration. Even better, you can't really put it on by yourself. In fact, it takes a team. Real knights had squires to buckle all those bits and pieces together just right. You probably strapped it on wrong, and now your left thigh plate is cutting into your hip like a medieval cheese slicer. And we haven't even talked about visibility. Your helmet is basically a metal bucket with slits. Your peripheral vision? Gone. Your hearing? Muffled. You know what that means? You don't see the guy coming at you from the side with a hammer until it's way too late. Your breathing is ragged. You're sweating bullets. Armor doesn't ventilate. There are no breathable panels. It's just you, your panic, and about 50 degrees of extra body heat sealed into a human pressure cooker. If it's summer, you're baking. If it's winter, doesn't matter. You're still sweating because fear overrides the weather. You try to move, but your joints catch. That's because armor's only as good as its articulation, and cheap stuff, like the kind a lowly conscript might get, is rigid. Think of it like wearing a full-body, rusted-up mech suit. You raise your sword arm, but your shoulder plate shifts and pinches something. You lower it. Too late. Someone's already noticed your hesitation. And heaven forbid you trip. Falling in armor is a nightmare. If you're lucky, you land in mud. If you're unlucky, you land on a rock and break something inside your metal shell. Either way, now you're a turtle on its back. And unless someone helps you up, they won't. You're just lying there, flailing, waiting for a merciful boot to the face. But maybe you're not in full plate. Maybe you're in mail, what they called mail. That's the stuff that looks like metallic fishnet. It's lighter, sure, but it still weighs around 25 to 30 pounds and it offers almost zero blunt force protection. A mace won't pierce it, but it will turn your ribs into soup underneath. Also, fun fact, mail pinches. Every time you move, tiny rings dig into your skin. By the end of a campaign, your armpits look like they've been mauled by squirrels. And guess what? Armor doesn't make you invincible. Hollywood lies. That stuff slows you down just enough for someone in grubby leather armor to get the jump on you. Or worse, someone with a billhook, a kind of oversized meat cleaver on a pole, which was specifically designed to yank knights off their horses and stab them through the neck holes. Fun. Oh, and if you think armor gives you dignity, it doesn't. You still have to relieve yourself. In the middle of a battle, there's no bathroom break. Most soldiers just let it happen. Yep. Peeing yourself in a $10,000 suit of armor was standard practice. Good luck explaining that to your ego. You're constantly adjusting, constantly overheating, constantly trying to figure out where that clanking noise is coming from. Spoiler, it's you. Every step is a guess. Every turn a gamble. You see a guy charging at you, but you're half a second too slow drawing your sword. Because everything's just a little too heavy. And don't even get me started on chafing. Have you ever worn metal on bare skin? No, of course you haven't. Because you're not a medieval disaster. Underneath the armor, you'd typically wear a padded garment called a gambeson, basically a quilted onacy. It absorbs sweat, cushions your body, and theoretically keeps the armor from cutting you. But if it gets soaked, and it will, now you're carrying around an extra 5 pounds of sopping wool. Congratulations. You're a walking mildew farm. You can't take it off, either. Not unless you want to be instantly murdered. So you're stuck inside your squeaky, sweaty, suffocating shell until the fighting stops, or you do. And remember, all this just to start fighting. You haven't even crossed swords yet. You're just trying to move in your new medieval metal exoskeleton while people around you are dying in the dirt. I used to think armor was cool. I imagined shining plate and heroic poses. Boy, was I wrong. It's not cool. It's claustrophobic. It's exhausting. And it turns you into a slow-moving, clanking pinata just waiting for someone with a polearm and bad intentions. And here's the kicker, the guy who kills you. He's probably wearing almost nothing. Maybe some boiled leather and a bad attitude. But he knows how to move. How to hit. How to take advantage of the fact that you can't turn your head fast enough to see his axe coming down on your shoulder. Armor doesn't save you. It delays you. And in a place where every second counts, that's enough to get you killed. Okay, so maybe you've figured out how to stumble around in your heavy, sweltering suit of metal misery. Maybe you've accepted the chafing, the pinching, the fact that your body now smells like wet wool and fear. Now all you need is a weapon, right? Something cool. Something knightly. Something worthy of a legend. Enter the sword. You know, the sleek, deadly, impossibly balanced blade of justice that slices through enemies like butter in every movie ever. Yeah, about that. Your sword is not Excalibur. It's not even close. The sword you're holding? It's probably a mass-produced, battlefield-grade hunk of iron, designed more for survival than style. It's chipped, it's dull, and it's about as aerodynamic as a crowbar. You hold it up, expecting it to whisper your destiny. Instead, it wobbles slightly because the grip is wrapped in something suspiciously sticky. Hopefully it's pitch. Hopefully. You take a practice swing. It's awkward. It doesn't glide through the air. It kind of lurches. Like it's mad at you for trying to use it. And it should be, because you have no idea what you're doing. Swords weren't lightweight wands of power. A typical medieval sword weighed around 2.5 to 4 pounds. Not a lot in theory, but try swinging that over and over while someone is trying to shove a spear through your abdomen. Your arm burns. Your wrist shakes. Your shoulder begins to scream like it's filing a workers' comp complaint. And worst of all, you're holding it wrong. See, most people think sword fighting is like fencing. Elegant. Predictable. Precision-based. Nah. Real sword fighting in the medieval period was dirty, desperate, and wildly inefficient. You weren't carving up people like fruit. You were bashing, hooking, stabbing, wrestling. More rugby than ballet. More panic than strategy. Most of the time, your sword wouldn't even be your go-to weapon in battle. Too slow. Too short. Too expensive. You were far more likely to carry a spear or a polearm. Why? Because reaching out and poking someone from 6 feet away is always better than getting close enough to smell their breakfast. But let's say you're stubborn. You've got your sword and you're determined to make it count. You raise it overhead and charge at the enemy. Brave. Noble. Suicidal. The first guy you run into is a professional. A mercenary who's been in 3 campaigns and lost a finger in each. He sees your sloppy grip from 10 yards away. He sidesteps your swing like he's swatting a fly, then smacks your helmet with the flat of his blade so hard your ears ring like cathedral bells. You back up. You try again. He grabs your sword hand. Grabs it. With his bare hand. Because sometimes that's what you did. Grappled, twisted, broke fingers. Swords were tools, not magic. And they were expensive. Losing one meant your next weapon was probably a rock. So you go to plan B. Stabbing. Great plan, except that most soldiers wore armor. And unless your sword is freakishly narrow, flexible, and perfectly placed, it's going to bounce right off a breastplate like a butter knife on a car door. That's why soldiers often used a technique called half-swording, where they gripped the blade itself halfway up and used it more like a lever or spike. Yes, grabbing the sharp end of your own sword was an actual tactic. That's how rough things were. And if you think sword fighting lasted long, it didn't. Most one-on-one sword fights ended in under 10 seconds. Usually with someone on the ground, bleeding, screaming, or dead. No long duels. No clanging banter. Just brute force, bad footing, and hopefully a well-timed thrust. You swing. You miss. You swing again. You connect, but it glances off a shield. Your sword arm is already aching, and your fingers are going numb from the vibration of that last hit. You drop it. Just for a second. Someone steps on it. Now it's gone. What do you do? If you're smart, run. If you're not, reach for your backup weapon, your dagger. And by dagger, I mean a glorified ice pick meant for finding the tiny gaps in armor and making someone very, very sorry. Close combat with a dagger is horrible. It's not a duel. It's a desperate, bloody shoving match. You're face to face, practically hugging the other guy while you both try to jab each other in the armpit or the eye socket. It's clumsy, slow, and extremely personal. You're not some epic warrior now. You're just two terrified meatbags trying to kill each other before someone else stabs you in the back. And guess what? Swords break. They chip, bend, and snap, especially the cheap ones. You might land the perfect hit only to watch your blade split in two like a snapped twig. Now you're holding a jagged piece of metal and zero self-respect. You look around. Other people are still fighting. Some are screaming. Some are on fire. One guy is using a shovel. Another has somehow fashioned two chicken bones into makeshift stabbing tools. It's chaos. And that sword you dreamed of mastering? It's buried in the mud behind you, stuck in the ribcage of someone who definitely didn't sign up for this either. So no, your sword isn't Excalibur. It's not a symbol of destiny or honor. It's a chunk of iron that's more likely to betray your wrist than win you glory. You don't fight like a hero. You fight like a panicked amateur in a meat grinder of mud, steel, and screaming. And if you're still alive, that sword is probably the last thing you'll remember holding before you run, cry, or die. Okay, let's say you've survived the first round of screaming, sweating, and sword-swinging incompetence. You've been bashed, bruised, and possibly relieved of your dignity, but you're still on your feet. Or at least crawling. And that's great. Except, you're already halfway dead, and not from weapons. Let's talk about the unsung killers of medieval warfare. Blisters, bruises, hunger, rot, and every disease your immune system has never heard of. See, you didn't just show up to the battlefield. You probably marched there for days, maybe weeks. Through forests, fields, mudflats, and plague-riddled villages. You slept in wet clothes. You ate maybe once a day, usually hard bread that could break your teeth, or salted meat that might have been beef 2 seasons ago. Your feet? Ruined. They're swollen, cracked, and covered in open sores. Your boots are stiff leather death traps. Every step is a negotiation between pain and momentum. You've got blisters on your blisters, and your toes haven't felt anything since 3 villages ago. And here's a little-known detail. Soldiers didn't just march in formation. They carried their gear, armor, weapons, food rations, maybe a kettle, and whatever junk the quartermaster forgot to distribute. Your back is shot. Your knees are mutinying. And you haven't bathed in weeks. Not because you're gross, well, you are, but because water is a precious commodity, and if you waste it washing, you're literally stealing from your own hydration. The bruises? Oh yeah. Every hour someone elbows you, steps on you, or accidentally clubs you with the blunt end of a spear. You fall down a slope, bang your shin on a cart axle, get whacked by a panicked guy waving a torch. You're not even on the battlefield yet, and you're already a walking pulp. And you're exhausted. I mean bone deep, soul level exhaustion. Not the kind you fix with a Red Bull and a nap. The kind where your arms go numb holding your weapon. The kind where you blink, and when your eyes open again, it's 10 minutes later and someone's yelling at you to move your half-dead carcass or get stabbed in the butt. Now let's talk digestion. Because nothing ruins a battle like medieval food poisoning. The meat, probably half-rotten. The bread, full of bugs. The beer, safer than water but brewed weak and usually warm. Your guts are doing Olympic flips and you can't risk sneezing too hard or you'll repaint the inside of your trousers. And remember, there are no bathrooms. Soldiers just went behind trees. Or in their armor. Or in ditches. Or right where they stood. Sanitation? That's a word no one invented yet. You've got open sores and mystery cuts, and you're trudging through a trench where 5 different types of bodily fluid have formed their own local ecosystem. Every scratch is a death sentence waiting to happen. A rusty nail, a splinter, a chipped tooth, any of those could get infected. And medieval infection wasn't gentle. No penicillin, no antiseptic, no understanding of why your hand is now the size of a pumpkin and smells like vinegar death. Doctors? If you were rich, maybe. If you were poor, you got a prayer and a poultice made of moss, wine, and possibly crushed frog. Let's say you get diarrhea. You will. Great. Now you're dehydrated. Your lips crack. Your joints seize. You're sweating and shivering at the same time. Try swinging a sword while your body is basically ghosting you. Still want to fight? Let's say you don't get sick. Congrats. Now you're just dealing with stress-induced insomnia, hypervigilance, and emotional collapse. You've seen men flayed, limbs hacked off, people begging for mercy and getting none. At night, the moans of the dying echo through your tent, well, top, or pile of hay, or hole you dug for shelter. You try to eat. Your hands shake too much to hold your spoon. The stew is cold, and you're not sure if the chewy bit was meat or someone's finger from a previous engagement. You drink more ale than water, because water gives you dysentery. But now you're buzzed, bloated, and still very much expected to wake up before sunrise to go get stabbed again. And when the weather turns, oh boy. Rain means mud. Mud means trench foot. Cold means frostbite. Heat means heat stroke. There is no good weather on a battlefield. The elements are a tag team of slow, invisible assassins. Your only defense is sheer stubbornness and a crust of dirt so thick it's practically armor. Even sleeping doesn't help. You lie down, and suddenly your whole body lights up with pain. That shoulder you bruised 4 days ago? Screaming. That ankle you twisted running from a horse? Now twice its size. Your muscles seize, your back spasms, and you dream of falling off cliffs made entirely of broken swords. And you're not even in combat anymore. This is just the pre-game. So when you finally line up for the next battle, your body isn't ready. It's hanging on by a thread. Your mind is fried. Your limbs are sluggish. Your stomach's empty but somehow still queasy. You take your place in formation, and you realize, you don't need a sword in your chest to die today. You might just collapse before anyone touches you. Because this battlefield doesn't start at the clash. It starts the minute you get your orders. And it wears you down day after miserable day, until your body gives out, your feet rot off, or your heart just stops trying. That's the part no one tells you. The part where you die by inches, blister by blister, bite by bite, bruise by bruise, before the real killing even begins. So you're battered, dehydrated, sleep-deprived, and probably carrying some kind of medieval gut demon. And now, for some ungodly reason, someone blows a horn and screams, "Cavalry incoming!" You look up, and there it is. A wall of armored horses thundering toward you. And suddenly, you understand fear on a cellular level. Let's get this straight. War horses were not the dainty, clip-clopping fairytale ponies you feed carrots to at a Renaissance fair. They were massive, muscle-packed beasts bred for 2 things, speed and destruction. Think of a 1,000-pound blender with hooves and an attitude problem. These animals didn't just run, you felt them running, through the ground, through your spine, through the rattling metal of your own sad little helmet. Now imagine dozens of these war machines coming straight at you. Their eyes are wide, nostrils flaring. You swear one of them is snarling. Behind them are riders, fully armored knights wielding lances the length of small trees. Each one is aimed vaguely in your direction. The pointy end? That's for you. And let's clear something up. Horses will absolutely trample you. People love to believe horses won't step on a person, like they're all psychic golden retrievers. That's adorable. In combat, that horse does not care. It will crush your ribs into jello if it means keeping momentum. They were trained to do that. To gallop full speed into a line of enemies, hooves stomping, weight crashing, and mouths foaming with bit-fueled rage. You try to run. Bad idea. Your armor slows you. The mud clutches at your boots like a medieval horror movie. Someone beside you falls, trips another guy, and suddenly half your unit is a tangle of flailing limbs and clanking panic. You hear the hooves now, closer, louder, thunder mixed with screaming. Your instincts betray you. You turn your head to look, and that's when it happens. Wham! A horse shoulder slams you like a battering ram. You fly backward, spin through the air, and hit the ground with the grace of a thrown potato sack. The wind leaves your lungs like it's breaking up with you. For a second, all you see is sky, and then a hoof slams into your side. Rib. Gone. You don't even register the pain at first. Your body is in emergency shutdown mode. You try to roll, to crawl, to breathe, but someone else lands on top of you, screaming. A lance skewers the ground 2 feet from your face. Another hits a man's chest so hard the wooden shaft snaps, sending splinters into your cheek. You're in a meat grinder. There's no front, no back, just chaos. And the cavalry isn't done. Because once the initial charge breaks the line, they circle around for another pass. You hear it coming, the hooves, the shouting, the shriek of some guy whose leg is now pointing in the wrong direction. You push yourself up, slip, grab for a weapon that isn't yours, and pray. To anyone. To anything. A sword flashes past you. Someone is knocked clean off their feet, mid-scream. Another man tries to stab upward with a spear, only to have it snapped like a twig when a horse crashes into him. The rider above you, he's not just along for the ride. He's swinging a sword, flail, or axe, anything with reach and momentum. His job is to chop you apart before your brain catches up to the fact that you're dying. And he's good at it. You can't reach him. Can't dodge him. You're a ground-bound target trying to fight a mounted blender with a rusted butter knife. Let's say, miraculously, you avoid the direct hit. You roll, duck, and somehow survive the first charge. Good job. You're now lying on the ground, surrounded by screaming, twitching bodies. One guy is crawling without legs. Another is yelling for his mother. You see a horse limping with a pike stuck in its flank, foaming at the mouth. You get up. Sort of. You're hunched, dizzy, your ears ringing like you've been slapped by God. You stagger forward. You step on something soft. It was a face. You don't stop to apologize. And here's the real kicker. The cavalry charge wasn't meant to kill everyone. Not directly. It was meant to shatter your formation, destroy your confidence, and break your mind. Once you're scattered, confused, and soaked in your friend's blood, then the infantry comes in. You hear the call. Another wave is coming. And you're still trying to figure out which direction is not death. So what can you even do against a horse? Aim low, they said. Use a pike, they said. Form a shield wall, they said. But none of those things work if you're panicking, disorganized, or already injured. And right now, you're all three. A friend of mine once compared facing cavalry to standing in front of a moving bus with a steak knife. It's not just dangerous, it's laughably unfair. You're trying to outmuscle a beast that weighs as much as your entire unit combined. And when that horse hits, it's not like getting punched. It's like getting erased. And if you do manage to stab the horse, you don't feel heroic. You feel horrible. Because it screams, a deep, panicked, human-sounding scream. Blood sprays. It rears. It kicks. And the rider comes down with a hatred in his eyes that says, "You just murdered my war machine." Now he wants revenge. You're tired. You're hurt. You can barely lift your sword. And there's another wave coming. So now you're dazed, filthy, and potentially concussed, surrounded by the aftermath of hooves, steel, and a very bad life decision. But before the next round of chaos rolls in, you get a precious few moments to look around. And maybe, if you're still upright, figure out who you're actually fighting for, and who you're supposed to be stabbing. Welcome to the medieval battlefield's roll call. Or, more accurately, its messy, uncoordinated group project from hell. Because here's the thing no one tells you in the heroic paintings and Hollywood epics. A medieval army wasn't some clean-cut, color-coded force with snappy uniforms and team spirit. It was a random collection of mercenaries, conscripted farmers, barely trained city boys, aging knights looking for a last hurrah, and maybe one guy who just followed the noise and hoped for loot. Half of them don't speak your language. A third of them don't even know whose side they're on. Let's break it down. You've got the knights, of course. The ones with the fancy gear and shiny armor. They are the professional class. Technically, most have spent their lives training for combat, riding horses, swinging swords, learning how to shout dramatically while pointing across valleys. Some are terrifyingly competent. Others, spoiled rich kids who wet themselves the second real blood appears. Then come the men-at-arms. Think of them as the knight's entourage, well-trained, well-equipped, and often way more dangerous than their fancy bosses. These are the guys you really don't want to cross. They know where to hit, how to grapple in armor, and how to make you disappear in a trench without anyone asking questions. After that, things get real fuzzy. There's the Levi infantry, peasants and townsfolk yanked from fields and bakeries and shoved into formation with a polearm and a 5-minute crash course in how not to die immediately. These guys are wearing whatever they own, maybe a padded vest, maybe a helmet from their uncle's attic. One might be wielding a sharpened shovel. Another, a pitchfork. Most, just hoping to live long enough to not get charged again. Don't forget the mercenaries. Professional killers for hire. These are your wild cards. Swiss pikemen, Flemish crossbowmen, Irish slingers, German halberdiers. They fight for gold, not glory. And they're just as likely to switch sides mid-battle if someone offers them better pay. They don't care who you are. They care what's in your purse, and whether they can take it off your cooling corpse. Mixed in among this chaotic soup, you've got the support units. Camp followers with daggers. Engineers with makeshift clubs. Boys as young as 12 acting as squires, water carriers, or human shields. No, really. Some are wives, mistresses, or unofficial helpers who stuck with the army for food and safety. Others are thieves. You wouldn't know the difference until your boots are gone. Then there are the commanders. Highborn lords with names like Sir Walter of Screamingdale who have barely seen a battle up close in their life. They bark orders from somewhere way in the back, safe behind a wall of flags and bodyguards. Their job is to look regal, shout vague commands, and take all the credit if your side wins. Coordinated? Not even a little. This isn't a well-oiled machine. It's a massive, confused traffic jam of ambition, fear, desperation, and questionable hygiene. No radios. No walkie-talkies. Orders are shouted over screams and carried by sweaty kids on foot. By the time a command reaches you, it's already outdated, or mangled into something like charge that hill and throw chickens at the sun. Identifying your allies? A nightmare. Forget uniforms. At best, your side might wear similar-colored armbands or badges. At worst, you're just supposed to recognize the local guys. Good luck with that when everyone's caked in mud and yelling in dialects that sound like someone gargling rocks. You hesitate. Is that guy charging toward you part of your unit? You raise your hand to signal peace. He responds by swinging an axe at your face. Guess not. Too late. Alliances are fragile. Too. That neighboring unit? They're here because of a land dispute from 40 years ago and still kind of hate your lord. If things go south, they might just leave. Or turn on you. Or, in a few particularly awkward battles in history, switch sides mid-fight and start stabbing their former teammates. It's not all chaos, though. Some units do have discipline, tight formations of trained pikemen, synchronized movements, practiced tactics. But you're probably in the crowd that just screamed and ran because someone waved a big stick and looked angry. And speaking of formations, you might be part of a shield wall. Sounds cool, right? Very Spartan. Until you realize that if the guy next to you dies, a gap opens. And guess who's standing next to that gap? Yeah, you. So you learn real quick. You are not part of some glorious machine of war. You're a semi-expendable cog in a duct-taped blender made of dirt, desperation, and barely trained limbs. Still, there is one upside. You're not alone. Everyone around you is just as terrified, just as sweaty, just as unsure which way to run when things get real. There's a strange, awful kind of comfort in the shared suffering. Sometimes, someone even pats your back and yells something encouraging, though it's in Norman French, so you just nod and hope it wasn't prepare to die. And just when you think you might get your bearings, an actual unit of armored infantry charges straight through your formation. Not the enemy. Your own side. Because nobody told them you were here. Because this army, it's a mess. A glorious, horrifying, mud-splattered mess where loyalty is fragile, clarity is a myth, and survival depends mostly on dumb luck and how quickly you can crawl into a ditch and pretend to be dead. And really, who could blame you? Now, let's talk about death. You've probably noticed by now that nobody dies like they do in movies. No slow motion collapse into a loved one's arms. No whispered final words. No clean stab, sudden gasp, and polite fall to the ground. On a medieval battlefield, death is ugly. It's loud, messy, unfair, and if you're lucky, quick. If not, well, buckle up. The first thing you notice? People don't fall when they die. Not right away. They crumple. They drop like broken puppets, limbs bent the wrong way, weapons still in hand, sometimes eyes still open. And they don't always go silent. Sometimes they scream. Sometimes they gurgle. Sometimes they just twitch. You see a man get stabbed, clean hit, center mass, and he just keeps going. 5 more steps. Then he drops, still swinging, like his body forgot to shut off. Another man gets cleaved through the shoulder. He spins, falls, and lies there coughing up blood bubbles, mouthing words no one can hear. You don't even know his name. And the sound of death. Not cinematic. It's wet. There's a squish to it, a crunch, sometimes, when bone breaks. You hear people begging. For help, for mercy, for their mother. You hear choking, wailing. The kind of sounds that stick to your skin long after the battle ends. One guy loses his leg at the thigh, hacked off by a lucky swing. He screams, sure, but mostly he squirms. Tries to crawl. He leaves a trail like a slug. Another takes an arrow to the stomach. He doesn't fall. He just stares down at it, like he's surprised. Then starts shaking. His guts are slowly pushing out past the shaft. He doesn't scream. He whimpers. And that's the truth of battlefield wounds. They don't kill you fast. They kill you badly. Sword wounds don't always mean instant death. A slash to the arm? Disabling, not fatal. A cut across the chest? Could take hours. A deep gut wound? That's the medieval version of a slow burn tragedy. You'll die eventually, after hours of agony and infection. But right now, you just lie there clutching your stomach, praying someone ends it quickly. That's why so many men faked death. It was a strategy. You fall. You roll under a corpse. You stay still and hope nobody decides to double-check. But there's always that guy, the one who walks through the carnage with a dagger, jabbing every body just to be sure. You hold your breath. Try not to flinch. One jab, you're outed. Or maybe he stabs anyway. Just in case. Oh, and here's a cheerful thought. You don't always die from your own wounds. The battlefield is dangerous even when you're not in combat. You trip over a corpse, and the guy behind you spears you accidentally. You get pushed into a ditch and trampled by fleeing allies. You take an arrow meant for someone else. One poor soul stumbles into a fire used to burn enemy banners and, well, catches. Screaming, flailing, ablaze. And let's talk about arrows for a second. In movies, someone gets hit with one and dies like they've been turned off. In real life, arrows don't kill unless they hit something vital. You take one in the thigh. Congratulations, you're not dead, but that leg's not working again. In the stomach? You're dying slowly. In the eye? Yeah, okay, that one's a wrap. Crossbow bolts are worse. They punch through armor. If you're unlucky enough to get hit in the torso, it's like being stapled to death. You're still alive, but now you're pinned to the dirt like an insect on display. And fire. Oh God. Fire. Flaming arrows, burning pitch, the occasional explosive clay pot. Fire is chaos. It doesn't just burn you. It scares you. Makes people run, break ranks, trample their own men. You see one guy engulfed, and your brain stops working. All you know is, I do not want that to be me. And then there's drowning. Yes, drowning. You fall into a water-filled ditch, stuck under the weight of your own armor. You can't swim. You can't even wriggle. The mud sucks you down. No one helps because no one sees. You die with your face 3 inches underwater and mud in your mouth. Now imagine the aftermath. The battlefield isn't cleared right away. Corpses lie in the sun. 4 hours. Days. Even. Horses bloat. Men rot. Crows gather. Dogs wander in from nearby villages. It becomes a buffet. You return later to find half a body, or none at all. And the smell, a punch in the throat. Sweet, sour, thick with decay. You feel it in your teeth. Sometimes the wounded are left behind. Alive. Barely. Too far gone to move. Too pitiful to finish off. They beg for water. Or mercy. And you might have to deliver it. Not kindness. The blade. One fast cut. Just to end the suffering. And that mess. You'll march through it tomorrow. Barefoot. Maybe. Or barefoot and wounded. Try not to look at the face that was screaming your name yesterday. So no, death on the medieval battlefield isn't quick. It isn't noble. It isn't fair. It's crawling. Shivering. Choking on blood and soil. It's being buried under a pile of strangers and forgotten the second the next horn blows. And if you're still alive, you'll never forget the sound of someone dying slowly. You're alive. Again. Somehow. Probably limping, definitely traumatized, and just now realizing that your hand has been clenched around the same sword hilt for 6 straight hours. You're not even holding it right anymore. It's fused to your fingers like a rusted claw. Your breath is ragged. Your nose is bleeding. Your ears are ringing. You'd think this would be the part where everyone retreats, takes a breath, maybe hugs it out. Nope. This is where the siege begins. If the open field chaos of a medieval battle didn't kill you, congratulations. You've just qualified for the next level of hell, a siege. Welcome to standing in place for days, sometimes months, waiting to either die slowly or watch your enemies starve. You see a castle on a hill. Looks romantic, right? Stone towers, fluttering banners, arched gates. Instagram ready. Except now it's a death trap. The defenders have locked themselves inside. Your side has to break in. And the method? Brutal patience. You surround it. You wait. You deny them food, water, sleep, mercy. Meanwhile, you're camping in a ditch. Siege warfare is not glamorous. You don't get epic one-on-one duels. You get trench foot, lice, and diarrhea in a communal pit. You get to build siege engines, massive wooden nightmares like trebuchets, catapults, and battering rams. These things look cool on paper, but in reality, they break, they jam, they take days to move 2 feet, and the guy operating them is always either drunk or cursed. Let's talk about trebuchets. They're basically medieval giant slingshots that hurl rocks the size of cows over castle walls. Sounds cool until one of those rocks lands short and flattens your friend Dave, who was just trying to eat a turnip. Accuracy? Optional. Reload time? Glacial. And the guys up on the wall? They've got their own little projectiles, arrows, boiling oil, and, if they're feeling especially medieval, severed heads. Yes. They throw your dead friends back at you, just to say hi. Then there's the waiting. Oh, the waiting. Every day is the same. You wake up in the mud. You eat something that might be food. You sit in a trench for hours. Occasionally, someone shouts they're opening the gate, and everyone panics, only to realize it was just a bird. Time warps. You go from maybe tomorrow we'll attack to I forgot what my village looks like. And while you wait, you get sick. Everyone gets sick. Dysentery spreads faster than gossip. If you see someone running with their hand on their butt, you run the other direction. There's no medicine, just prayer and herbal sludge applied by someone whose medical knowledge comes from leeches and astrology. Then comes the rot. Your gear starts to fall apart. Your boots leak. Your gambeson mildews. Your sword rusts. You get trench rot on your feet. Your teeth ache. You dream of bread that isn't hard enough to use as a weapon. You get bored. So bored. And boredom breeds stupidity. Brawls break out over dice games. A guy tries to sneak into the castle at night, gets spotted, and is returned the next morning catapulted back over the wall, minus his head. Another guy swears he saw a ghost. You want to believe him because anything's better than sitting in this lice farm pretending the beef jerky you're gnawing isn't just your own dried boot leather. Then, finally, a signal. They've decided to attack. This is it. The grand finale. You're handed a ladder. That's right. A ladder. And you're told to run straight at a wall and climb it. While people on top are dropping rocks, pouring boiling tar, and firing arrows into your face. If this sounds like a death wish, that's because it is. You run. You trip. You get halfway up before someone dumps boiling water on your head. You scream. You fall. You land on the guy behind you. His leg snaps like kindling. Now you're both crawling in the mud, screaming. Another guy makes it to the top, only to be pushed off like a sack of potatoes. Back down in the trenches, someone yells to bring the battering ram. You gather behind it. It's slow, heavy, and makes you a perfect target. Every defender on the wall is aiming directly at your big wooden turtle. You march forward anyway. Thunk. Thunk. The ram hits the gate. Arrows rain down. One punches into your shoulder. Doesn't kill you, but now you're one-armed and bleeding on your friend. Eventually, the gate cracks. That's when the real horror begins. You pour into the courtyard. It's tight. Loud. Slippery with blood and mud. You swing your weapon, but there's no space. You stab someone in the thigh. He goes down. You get stabbed in the back. You spin and see a teenager with a knife and dead eyes. You trip over a corpse. Someone steps on your hand. Everything blurs. You win the siege. Not because you were strong or smart, but because the defenders ran out of food, or gave up, or just fell asleep at the wrong moment. And the reward? Looting. But not the fun kind. This is pillaging. People screaming, houses burning, the last scraps of humanity slipping away under your muddy boots. You watch a man pull a silver ring off a dead woman's finger with his teeth. Someone else drinks wine straight from a barrel while bodies lie around like discarded clothes. You don't feel like a victor. You feel tired. Empty. Starving. You slump in a corner with a crust of bread and wonder if this counts as a win. Your stomach gurgles. Your mouth tastes like iron and ash. You've survived the siege. But something in you didn't. So, the siege is over. You're alive, somehow. Covered in grime, possibly limping, possibly coughing up bits of your own lungs. But you made it. Now comes the part you definitely didn't fantasize about as a kid, cleanup. And I don't mean you put on gloves and politely tidy up the rubble. I mean you are now knee-deep in the aftermath. Corpses, carnage, and the worst smell you've ever experienced in your short, now highly regrettable life. The battlefield the next morning? It looks like hell had a yard sale. You step out into a muddy field painted with blood and broken steel. The bodies aren't neatly arranged. They're flung everywhere, some still clutching weapons, others twisted in shapes that defy basic anatomy. Flies have already arrived. So have the dogs. Crows circle above like they're waiting for a table to open up at their favorite restaurant. And it stinks. Oh, it stinks. Imagine raw meat left in a hot car for 3 days, mixed with sewage, sweat, and burning hair. That's your new cologne. It soaks your clothes, clings to your hair, and somehow gets inside your helmet. You'll carry that smell in your nostrils until the day you die. But you can't just leave the dead lying around. Not unless you want disease to wipe out the rest of the survivors faster than any sword ever could. So guess what? It's burial time. And there's no priest, no funeral, no weepy violin. Just a couple of exhausted soldiers with shovels, digging trenches in soil that's half mud, half blood, and trying not to think too hard about who they're tossing in next. Sometimes you recognize someone. A friend. A neighbor. That guy who gave you half his bread 2 weeks ago. You don't have time to mourn. You whisper something, maybe, and then you keep digging. But that's the easy part. The harder job? Stripping the dead. See, armor and weapons are expensive. Real expensive. So you're expected to loot the fallen, even your own fallen. You pry helmets off crushed skulls. You cut belts, boots, anything useful. You unclasp breastplates soaked with what you hope is just dried blood. Sometimes you have to break fingers to get rings or gloves off. You learn real fast that a corpse is just another asset. Not a person. Just a thing that maybe has some gear your commander can resell, or maybe you can keep, if no one's watching. It gets worse when they're not quite dead. You hear groaning. From the pile. One guy's still alive. His lower half's gone, but is looking at you, blinking. You freeze. Do you help him? There's no doctor. No stretcher. He's not going to make it. You know that. So maybe, if you're merciful, you end it. Quietly. A dagger to the heart. Or you just walk away, pretending you didn't hear him beg. Some soldiers don't pretend. They finish off the wounded for loot. A fast strike, and they take the coin purse or dagger hidden in the boot. It's not evil. It's just policy. And if you're wounded, good luck. Because unless you're nobility, there's no triage. No surgery. No first aid. You either patch yourself up with a dirty rag and hope, or you lie still and wait for someone to decide you're worth saving. Spoiler, you're probably not. Even if you do get help, the treatment is worse than the wound. Got an arrow stuck in you? They yank it out without anesthesia. You pass out from the pain. Maybe the arrowhead breaks off inside. Too bad. It'll fester. Got a gash. They cauterize it. That means red-hot iron on open flesh. The smell alone could drop a grown man. But hey, it seals the wound. If you survive the infection. Oh, and infection is everywhere. There are no clean tools. No gloves. No understanding of germs. If someone stitches you up, they're doing it with the same needle they used on 5 other guys, one of whom definitely had gangrene. So you lie there, feverish, hallucinating, surrounded by other wounded men coughing up blood or groaning in their sleep. Some won't wake up. Others will scream through the night until silence comes naturally. And food? You're back to stale bread and water that smells like pond scum. You can't keep it down anyway. Your stomach's in rebellion, and your body's burning so many calories trying to heal that you're losing weight like a bad medieval diet plan. Sleep is no better. You close your eyes and see the faces of people you killed. Or the ones you didn't kill fast enough. You hear the clang of weapons. The final shriek of the horse that landed on your sergeant. The crunch of bones under your boots. Every snap and splash and scream replays behind your eyelids like a cursed lullaby. Sometimes, you envy the dead. And all around you, survivors trying to pretend this is normal. One guy hums while cleaning blood off his axe. Another is arguing about who gets to keep a corpse's helmet. A third is making soup with meat you hope is from a goat. You don't ask. You just eat and try not to taste guilt. But deep down, something's changed. You're not the same person who showed up to this battlefield. That version of you, the one who dreamed of glory, of heroics, of honor, is buried in one of those trenches now. You didn't notice it at the time, but it died somewhere between the mud and the moans and the smell of hot iron on flesh. What's left? A husk with a sword. Barely breathing. Still bleeding. Still here. Alright, so you've survived the battle, the siege, the horrific cleanup, and you're lying in some dank, overcrowded camp trying to figure out what the heck just happened to your life. You might think the nightmare's over, but no. Welcome to the endless purgatory known as medieval military camp life. Think of it as a roach motel for soldiers. You check in. You don't check out. You eat, you sleep, and you live in a pit of mud and misery, with occasional moments of panic and terror thrown in for flavor. First off, hygiene. Spoiler alert, it doesn't exist. You share a tent, if you're lucky, with half a dozen sweaty, smelly guys. No showers. No toothpaste. No deodorant. Your clothes haven't seen soap since you got here, which might be a blessing because soap was rare and usually made from animal fat and ashes. Imagine that smell. Everyone's covered in lice. They crawl through your hair, bite your skin, and lay eggs in your armpits like it's their personal Airbnb. Scratching yourself becomes a full-time job. Your friends are the same, and you can't avoid them. They're all you have. Now, let's talk about the food. You get rations, but they're about as appetizing as eating shoe leather dipped in swamp water. Hard-tack biscuits, basically rock hard, stale crackers, are your daily bread. Meat is rare and usually salted or smoked until it's a leather substitute. Vegetables? Forget about it. Fresh food spoils fast and the supply chain is medieval at best, which means the peasants delivering food probably ate half of it. Water. If it's not stagnant, it's suspicious. Soldiers frequently drink from the same filthy streams that serve as toilets for the camp. Unsurprisingly, this leads to a buffet of gastrointestinal horrors. Dysentery, cholera, and other diseases run rampant, turning even the toughest men into walking piles of regret. Sleep is a luxury you don't get. The camp buzzes with noise 24/7. Horses neigh, guards shout, rats scuttle. You're on edge, always half alert for a surprise attack or a thief trying to steal your meager belongings. Your bed is usually just dirt or a thin layer of straw, lumpy and infested with whatever creepy crawlies exist in this part of the world. Boredom and fear mix into a potent cocktail that causes fights to break out over the dumbest things, like who gets the last spoon of gruel or whose turn it is to stand watch. Speaking of watch duty, standing guard is about as fun as chewing nails dipped in vinegar. You're freezing in winter, baking in summer, all while trying not to fall asleep or be trampled by a stampede of drunken soldiers returning from the tavern. And taverns? If you think they're cozy pubs, think again. Soldiers flock there after a day of misery to drink away their sorrows, which usually means consuming weak ale that barely masks the taste of sadness and despair. Fights break out. Women, some camp followers, try to earn a few coins. Stories are told, some true, most wildly exaggerated. Everyone's pretending, even if just for a moment, that the war doesn't suck. There's also the dreaded discipline. Lords and captains enforce rules with a mix of brutality and apathy. Stealing, desertion, drunkenness, any offense could land you in the stocks, get you flogged, or even executed on the spot. Rules are patchy and enforcement depends on who's in charge. Sometimes, the guy with the worst temper is the one doling out justice. And then there's morale. Good luck with that. It swings wildly, like a drunk on a tightrope. One day you're convinced you'll be a hero. The next, you're wondering if your family will even recognize what's left of you. But here's the kicker, this miserable camp life is normal for medieval soldiers. They sign up knowing this is their reality. Glory? Maybe in stories. For now, it's mud, rats, bad food, and the constant, gnawing fear that the next battle might be your last. You survive this long enough, and your body starts to feel like it's made of lead. Every muscle aches. Every breath is a reminder you're still alive, and that might be the worst part of all. Alright, so you've slogged through battles, sieges, and the hellish camp life. But you're not just a mindless grunt in a muddy pit. You're part of a medieval army with a whole ecosystem of weird roles and jobs nobody talks about. This isn't just swords and arrows. It's a sprawling, chaotic machine with cogs ranging from noble knights to the utterly bizarre. Let's start with the camp followers. They're not official soldiers, but don't underestimate them. These folks include wives, cooks, blacksmiths, prostitutes, merchants, and sometimes downright criminals who hitch a ride with the army for safety or profit. They live on the fringes of the camp, running makeshift markets, fixing armor, cooking suspicious meals, and occasionally stirring up drama that's more intense than the battles. The cooks, for instance, are unsung heroes, or villains, depending on your appetite. Imagine trying to cook a stew with half-rotten vegetables, questionable meat, and whatever spices you can scrounge from the plunder. The result? Something that smells like a swamp and tastes like despair. But hey, at least it's warm and keeps you alive, right? Then there are the blacksmiths and armorers, the medieval mechanics. Without them, your fancy sword turns into a rusty toothpick, and your armor falls apart faster than a cheap cosplay costume. These guys toil day and night, hammering metal, patching holes, sharpening blades, and sometimes improvising fixes on the fly during battle pauses. If you've got a broken helmet, they're your only hope, though they often charge a king's ransom or demand a share of your loot. Ever wonder who takes care of the horses? Meet the grooms and farriers. They feed, clean, and shoe the war horses, because a lame horse equals a useless knight. Horses are high-maintenance diva animals, and their caretakers know it. They're the reason your charger doesn't collapse in the middle of a charge, and you owe them your life when that horse bucks a poisoned arrow out of its flank. Now, the messengers. Before radios or even carrier pigeons, okay, they did have pigeons sometimes, but those birds are unreliable. Messengers were the fastest runners or riders who darted between commanders, carrying orders. They had one job: don't get captured, don't get lost, don't get killed. No pressure. And here's where things get truly medieval: the heralds and trumpeters. They are the original hype squad. Heralds shout proclamations, deliver challenges, and spread rumors. Trumpeters blow their horns to signal charges, retreats, or lunchtime. Which, by the way, was a big deal because when that horn sounded, everyone dropped whatever they were doing and scrambled for their hardtack. Then, the chaplains and priests. You'd think these guys would be comforting voices, but nope, they're often the ones reminding everyone that death is just a door to heaven, or a reason to confess sins, right before the next wave of carnage. They conduct quick, grim masses on muddy battlefields, sometimes trying to keep morale up, other times just praying for their own survival. But what about the medics? If you thought medieval medicine was advanced, brace yourself. The surgeons were more like butcher apprentices with a sharp knife and a prayer. They amputated limbs with saws, sewed wounds with dirty thread, and poured boiling oil or hot irons on injuries to cauterize them. Painkillers? A mixture of herbs, alcohol, and sometimes opium, but not nearly enough. Sterilization? Ha! You got lucky if they didn't reuse the same scalpel on you and the guy before you. Every role you see, from the glamorous knight to the lowliest camp servant, is part of a giant, unglamorous, sometimes horrifying machine. The army is like a messy family reunion with swords, dirt, and a distinct lack of personal hygiene. And remember, each of these people has their own fears, dreams, and reasons for being here. Some are chasing glory. Others just want to see tomorrow. Many are trying to escape something worse: poverty, law, or worse. It's a melting pot of humanity, fear, and desperation. So next time you imagine a medieval battle, don't just picture the swords clashing and horses charging. Think of the cooks over smoky fires, the farriers hammering horseshoes in the dark, the chaplain whispering last rites, and the kid running like his life depends on it, because it does. Because on this battlefield, everyone has a role, and no one's safe. By now, you're probably wondering about the weapons you're supposed to fight with. Spoiler, they're not all shiny, perfectly balanced swords. In fact, many of them are downright terrifying in their weirdness, and even more terrifying when you realize they were designed by people who never heard of ergonomics or, honestly, common sense. First up, the sword. Everyone's favorite medieval weapon, right? Well, yes and no. Sure, knights loved them. They were status symbols, fashion statements, and occasionally, deadly. But for most soldiers, swords were expensive and often unreliable. Many were dull, heavy, or badly made. Using a sword in full armor was like swinging a wet noodle sometimes, hard to control and exhausting. And if you're fighting a well-armored knight, good luck slicing through steel plates with a medieval sword. You'll probably end up bruised and tired. Enter the polearms, spears, halberds, pikes, and their cousins. These were the infantry's secret weapons. Long reach meant you could poke, hook, or bash your enemy from a safer distance. The halberd, for example, combined an axe blade, a spear point, and a hook, basically a Swiss Army knife of medieval mayhem. It's like the multi-tool your grandpa never had. Polearms were cheap to make, easy to use, and incredibly effective in groups. Think of them as medieval crowd control devices. Then there's the mace and flail, the medieval wrecking balls. If your opponent's armor was too tough for your sword, these blunt instruments did the trick by smashing bones and concussing foes. The flail, with its spiked ball on a chain, looks like a medieval nightmare weapon designed for Halloween. It was hard to master and easy to accidentally hit your own guys, but when wielded right, brutal. You can't forget bows and crossbows. Archers were the snipers of the medieval battlefield. Bows were fast and deadly but required years of practice and a lot of strength. Crossbows, on the other hand, were the medieval version of point-and-shoot guns, easy to learn but slow to reload. Crossbow bolts could punch through armor like a hot knife through butter, which made archers highly feared and hated. Enemies often targeted archers first because once those arrows start flying, you're in for a bad day. And for the close-up freak show, the dagger. Everyone had one tucked somewhere, like a medieval Swiss Army knife for stabbing, cutting, or just looking cool when your sword broke. Daggers were vital for finishing off wounded enemies or sneaking a quick kill in a cramped fight. Not all weapons were practical. The medieval mind had a flair for the dramatic. There were warhammers, spiky metal clubs meant to punch holes through armor, and the Bec de Corbin, Raven's Beak, which looked like a creepy bird's head on a stick, designed to puncture helmets and crush skulls. These weapons screamed, "I'm here to ruin your day." Now, let's get real about armor. Armor was heavy, hot, and exhausting to wear. It was basically medieval full-body Tetris made of metal plates and leather straps. Knights and men-at-arms sported plate armor that could weigh up to 60 pounds. That's like carrying a toddler strapped to your body while running uphill. Armor protected you from swords, arrows, and even maces to some extent. But it wasn't invincible. Arrows could find gaps. Maces could transfer blunt force through plates. And that heavy armor made you slower, less agile, and prone to heat exhaustion. One knight collapsing in battle wasn't just from wounds. It was often dehydration or fatigue. For common soldiers, it was worse. Many wore little more than a padded jacket or chainmail shirt. Chainmail was expensive, so lots of peasants fought in leather jerkins or even just thick cloth. Not great when facing a spear to the gut. Helmets ranged from simple iron caps to elaborate designs with visors shaped like demons or birds. Stylish? Sure. Practical? Sometimes. Many soldiers refused to wear full helmets because they obstructed vision and hearing, making it easier to get stabbed from behind. Talk about a catch-22. In short, your weapons and armor are a mixed bag. Sometimes they save your life. Sometimes they're a heavy burden that slows you down while your opponent's flail pulverizes your ribs. So yeah, you'd last about 30 seconds on the medieval battlefield with a rusty sword and a dented helmet, and that's being generous. Now, since you're barely hanging on with your weird sword and your slightly cracked helmet, let's talk about something you really need to know to survive: tactics. Or, well, what passed for tactics on a medieval battlefield, which, spoiler, often looked like a messy, loud, confusing slugfest with a sprinkle of oh no moments. First off, medieval armies rarely fought in neat, organized lines like in movies. Instead, battles were a bit like a mosh pit combined with a giant game of human Tetris where nobody's read the rules. The commanders did have plans, but executing them, that was the tricky part. The most famous tactic you might have heard of is the shield wall. Imagine a human wall made from overlapping shields, like giant, squishy turtle shells. This was a favorite among infantry because it offered decent protection against arrows and charges. But here's the catch: if even one guy in that line panics or falls, the whole thing can crumble like a badly baked cake. And since medieval soldiers were only human, Panic was pretty common. Then there's the cavalry charge. Picture a squadron of knights charging full tilt on horseback, weapons gleaming, hair flying in the wind, very cinematic. In reality, cavalry charges were terrifying, but also dangerous for the knights themselves. Horses could get spooked, riders could fall, and if the infantry formed a tight pike formation, yes, those scary spear walls, the charge would just bounce off like a bug hitting a windshield. Sometimes, charges turned into chaotic brawls where it was anyone's guess who'd survive. Archers played a huge tactical role, too. Positioned on hills or behind infantry lines, they rained death from afar. But here's a fun fact: early medieval archers had limited range and accuracy, so unless you were a trained longbowman, your arrows were more spray and pray than sniper precision. Also, the enemy's cavalry loved to target archers first because they were the real game changers. Speaking of formations, there was the pike square, a dense block of soldiers holding long pikes pointed outwards like a hedgehog on steroids. This was incredibly effective against cavalry. Horses didn't like running into giant walls of spear points. The downside? Those formations were slow and clumsy. They could be flanked or bombarded by enemy missile troops. Surprise was a tactic, too. Ambushes, night attacks, and sneaky maneuvers were often more effective than charging head-on. But pulling off a surprise attack required good communication and discipline. Two things medieval armies sometimes lacked. Communication itself was a nightmare. No radios, no signal flares. Instead, commanders relied on horns, drums, and flags to send orders. The problem? Smoke, noise, and confusion often meant messages got lost or misunderstood. You might be told to hold the left flank, but by the time your unit hears the command, the left flank might be somewhere else entirely. And here's a kicker: medieval battles often ended because one side ran out of patience or got scared and fled. Routing was contagious. Once a few soldiers turned tail and bolted, panic spread like wildfire, and the battle dissolved into a chaotic slaughter or a desperate retreat. Oh, and retreats. Not exactly organized either. A strategic withdrawal often looked like a panic stampede where soldiers dropped their weapons and ran for their lives. Those who got caught were either captured or killed, because medieval armies didn't usually take prisoners unless they were nobles who could be ransomed. So, when you imagine the glorious medieval battle, think less knights in shining armor and more a massive, muddy brawl with confused yelling, failed plans, and lots of screaming. The tactics were often rudimentary, but the chaos? That was guaranteed. And you're smack in the middle of it, sword in hand, wondering why you didn't just stay home and become a blacksmith. Okay, you've endured the battle chaos, the filthy camp, the weird jobs, the crude weapons, and the slapdash tactics, and somehow, you're still standing. But here's the brutal truth: even if you survive the battlefield, your story is far from over. Welcome to the medieval aftermath, where the real suffering begins. First, the wounds. Remember that arrow you took to the leg? Or the nasty gash from the axe? They might not kill you immediately, but infection will try. Medieval medicine didn't know about germs, so wounds often got infected and turned gangrenous. Imagine your leg swelling, turning black, and oozing poison while fever robs you of strength. Amputation was the only cure, but it was terrifying and dangerous. Think sores, no anesthesia, and blood everywhere. If you survive the amputation, congrats. You now have a lifelong souvenir, a stump. Prosthetics were crude, wooden pegs or hooks that looked like they came from a pirate's costume party. Functional? Sometimes. Comfortable? Not at all. For others, infections spread internally. Pneumonia, septicemia, and other killers lurked behind every cough or fever. Hospitals were rare and often worse than the battlefield. They were overcrowded, filthy, and run by monks who might bless you or bleed you with leeches. Either way, survival was a lottery. Then there's the psychological aftermath. You don't have a name for PTSD back then, but every soldier experienced it. Nightmares, panic attacks, and emotional numbness were as common as lice. Yet, no one talked about it. Men were expected to be tough, to suck it up, to march on. Crying was for women or madmen. You might find yourself jumping at shadows, unable to hold a conversation without breaking down, or feeling haunted by the faces of those you killed. or failed to save. There was no therapy, just grim acceptance. Your social status could change, too. If you were a noble or knight, you might come home to wealth, lands, or political power, assuming you lived. But most common soldiers returned to poverty, disability, or worse. Injuries often meant you couldn't work your fields, support your family, or even afford basic needs. Some became beggars or joined roaming bands of outlaws, because war was the only life they knew. The economy itself felt the war's impact. Villages were looted, farms burned, and trade disrupted. Food shortages led to famine. Taxes increased to fund more wars. The peasantry suffered the most, caught between armies and rulers. And the cycle? It rarely ended. Medieval Europe was a constant churn of conflict. If you survived one battle, odds were you'd be dragged into another. Wars weren't just about glory, they were about survival, territory, power, and, sometimes, just plain spite. So, if you think lasting 30 seconds on a battlefield was tough, try lasting a lifetime in a world where war was the norm, pain was daily, and hope was scarce. That's the real medieval story. Not the heroics or the legends, but the grit, the grime, and the grim reality of survival. You've been through hell. Now it's time to rest. You're almost at the end of this brutal journey, still alive, still breathing, still aching from head to toe. The battlefield has claimed friends, limbs, innocence, and yet here you are. That alone is a kind of miracle, though it probably doesn't feel like one. You're exhausted beyond words, physically and mentally drained, and all you want is a moment of peace. But before we close this chapter, let's pause and look at the bigger picture. Because surviving a medieval battlefield wasn't just about the fight itself, it was about enduring the aftershocks that rippled through every part of life. War was woven into the fabric of medieval existence like a relentless, hungry beast. The clash of swords and cries of the dying echoed beyond the field, into villages, homes, and hearts. Families waited anxiously for news that might never come. Wives and mothers stitched shirts stained with blood and hope, clinging to the slimmest chance that their men would return. The land itself bore the scars. Fields turned to mud baths. Forests cleared for marching routes. Roads clogged with carts carrying wounded or plunder. The echoes of battle lingered in the soil, the air, the water. 4 years after, the ghosts of violence haunted every corner. And yet, amid this suffering, life persisted. People planted crops, raised children, sang songs, and dared to dream of peace, even if it felt impossible. You, now, are part of that story. The story of survival against staggering odds. Of ordinary people thrown into extraordinary horrors and somehow making it through. So, as you settle into quiet, let your body relax. Feel the weight of this tale ease off your shoulders. Imagine the muddy fields turning green again. Hear the distant laughter of children playing where swords once clashed. Smell fresh bread baking in the village ovens. Taste cool, clean water. You made it through the chaos, through the noise and fear, through the pain and despair. And here you are, still alive, still breathing. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Remember, history isn't just dates and battles. It's the stories of real people who faced unimaginable odds. And sometimes, those stories remind us how strong we truly are. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease out of this night together. Sweet dreams.